They're just getting in the way. And it feels like in the meantime, the virus is going to run its course. Nature's going to take its course. There's that, you mentioned that letter, another letter that's been signed by whatever, 4,000 scientists.
Yeah.
And some of them are saying herd immunity is like night follows day. It's inevitable, they say. Some of them, it's like gravity. You can't avoid herd immunity. Now, others of them are saying, well, no, you can't necessarily rely on herd immunity. And just because you've had the disease once doesn't mean that you can't catch it again. So you've got that split decision. But if those ones are right, that we're going to end up with herd immunity as an inevitability, you know, I mean, some of the virologists are saying that any virus, it doesn't want to be lethal because if you kill your host, you're homeless.
Yes.
So it's in the interest of a virus to become non-lethal because all they really want is somewhere warm and moist to live. They just need a happy host. And so in all likelihood, as I understand it, given a couple of years, COVID will be non-lethal, and we'll all just have to live with it the way we live with so many other viruses.
And we might all have it in the same way that we would all have it if we got a vaccination, you know, because we were told way back at the beginning that probably everybody will get it, and that the reason for the original lockdown was to make sure that we didn't all get it at once and people didn't overwhelm the health service. I understand that logic, I get all that, but now, when we're hearing that lockdowns actually don't work, in fact, they increase infection rates in some areas, when we hear that students being locked down in their halls of residence is actually not stopping it spreading, you know, clearly you can't stop it spreading. I mean, that's the only sensible conclusion to come to.
Yeah, it's the Indiana Jones factor.
Yeah.
The virus seems to be, it's running through its own, it's taking its own course. And as you said, as we were told at the beginning, they had to flatten the curve, so that all the illness and death wasn't all happening on the same day. But at no point did anybody say those people wouldn't get ill and die.
Right.
They just didn't want them all to get ill and die in the same week.
Right.
But it would overwhelm the National Health Service. And gradually, whether you like it or not, until they get this fabled vaccine, now that's a leap of faith, will they? And if so, when?
Right.
But until they do, people are gradually going to come in contact with the virus. And for whatever reasons, with those people's immunities or their underlying health conditions or whatever, or their age, they're going to get ill and die. You know, nobody ever said when they talked about flattening the curve that it was going to save lives. It was just going to stop loss of life happening all at once and overwhelming the National Health Service.
Well, I still think that the main kind of shall we say, sort of driving force was those scenes from northern Italy, which came out right at the beginning, where you could see bodies piling up in hospital corridors, you know, rooms full of the dead, and lorries having to take them away in the middle of the night, because no politician, as I said at the time, could probably survive that in this country. Nobody would want to see that, and it would be horrifying. So they just desperately wanted to make sure that there was no overcrowding, and there never was. I mean, those Nightingale hospitals were never used.
Yeah, and this thing, I keep on going back over this idea about save the NHS. In the event of a national health emergency, what is the NHS for?
Right.
It's like people that keep the plastic covers on their couch rather than use it, rather than enjoy it. At what point are you going to take the covers off and use this thing in the way that it's intended? What save the NHS for what? It's like if you had a crisis of faith, and a religion might say, well, let's just make sure all the church buildings are in good nick and never bring the congregation.
Yeah. I mean, I liken it. My analogy to that is don't run any trains in case they crash or become overcrowded.
Or wear out.
Yeah.
Don't run the trains because the wheels might get worn out.
Right.
What is this? What are you saving? If you've got a national health service that people have been paying into for generations, that absorbs and needs billions of pounds all the time, if we're going to have it, when else are you going to use it?
Right.
Possibly to the point of destruction if needs be.
Yeah. But
in the case of a global health emergency.
Yeah. But you see, I've always thought, Neil, that these organisations like the Chief Medical Officer's Office, Public Health England, they've been working towards this for a while. You know, they've tried this kind of preventative medicine, as they call it, but which is actually telling you how to live your life. You know, don't smoke, don't drink too much, don't get too fat, don't be a drain on the health service. Well, get stuffed, because I pay my taxes so that I can be a drain on the health service if I so wish.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. You
No.
can't charge people for something that you then don't let them use when they need it.
Right. Exactly.
Where's the point of that? You either have to have something that's somehow free, that doesn't cost the user anything, in which case you can deny the user its use if you so wish. But if you're charging somebody for the existence of a service,
Yeah.
you can't, at the very moment when they need it, say, I'm saving that for a rainy day.
No, and they waste bucket loads of money. I heard a story from a friend of mine the other day who called me and said he's got his girlfriend's Portuguese. Her father is going into hospital for some kind of operation. He doesn't speak very good English, so they said that they'll get an interpreter for him. And she said, well, I can come in and be the interpreter because he'd probably quite like me to be around anyway. They said, no, you can't do that because you're not COVID safe, right? However, they haven't said that they're going to test the interpreter to make sure the interpreter's COVID safe, and the interpreter costs £500 a day. And that's the NHS.
Yeah, so this illogicality, if that's a word, of the way in which everything is being saved and spared around keeping the NHS for an emergency.
Right.
This is the emergency.
Right.
This is when we need it. And even if we used it to the point of destruction, well, at least we had it.
Right.
But, and at the moment, I mean, obviously, there's this ridiculous, terrifying situation where, you know, you've got health ministers saying you can't have cancer treatment until we get to a better place with COVID. You know, and we're just having to face up to the reality that people are going to die of coronary disease.
Yeah, I mean, how is that acceptable? If it's not acceptable, what's the point of saving lives if you're going to kill more lives by saving the other lives?
Yeah. It's this preoccupation with the one threat to life.
Right.
As though the other threats to life have somehow been put on hold as well. And they haven't. Cancer and heart disease and depression and suicide and all the rest of the terrible ailments that befall mankind are still out there doing their thing, unobstructed, because we've all got to dedicate all resources, all time and all attention, crash the economy, periodically face lockdowns and all the rest of it, just because of the arrival of the latest new virus.
Yeah. And
viruses have been arriving in amongst our species on planet Earth since the beginning. But never before have we decided that this is the one for which everything else must be set aside. Economies must tank, people's livelihoods must be destroyed, people must be shut in their homes till depression gets the better of them. They have to die for want of every other available treatment, because COVID is #1 and will be #1 until we've got a vaccine for it. I don't remember being asked to vote for that.
No, because I think also that it speaks to an arrogance that the political class has now kind of adopted, that they can stop things from happening, or they can make things happen, and everything sort of is done at their behest, if you like. You know, how about you just admit that you can't stop it happening, and then you work from there, rather than saying, we must stop this from spreading, because they can't stop it.
No, evidently they can't. It would appear that from the moment this virus appeared among us, that a certain number of people in every population were eventually going to be adversely affected by it. We're going to get those ones who, for whatever reason, couldn't survive it, were going to be harvested by it. And all of these efforts, lockdowns, the catastrophe for the economy, all the other collateral damage that's been done, we were supposed to absorb it because we were being reassured that if the authorities were allowed to do all the things they wanted to do, they could fix it. And they can. And I would put good money on the fact that a couple of years from now, the death toll in every part of the world will be proportionally the same as everywhere else.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right.
COVID-19, one way or another, with or without intervention, will have taken a given percentage of every population, and we will look back wide-eyed and shaky at what we have done in the intervening period. You know, smoking ruin of our economies and society, and we will not have been able to save a single life.
Yes.
We'll have delayed them, we'll have caused them to happen at different times, but whatever it is, 0.1% of everyone's population will have been taken.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And there certainly seems to be evidence from what I can see of Nicola Sturgeon's kind of rowing back slightly today, which is what we think she's going to do from this circuit breaker lockdown, right? That she's now frightened of doing that because it may be a step too far for her politically. She might also not be doing it because she can't afford to do it, because they'd have to somehow come up with another furlough scheme, and they don't really have the money for that. But I'm wondering, the more pressure that gets put on by people like these 4,000 doctors to people like Boris Johnson, he will bend, because he doesn't like being told he's unpopular. He doesn't like, if enough people start telling him, he might just see the light.
Yeah, it's impossible to tell now whether decisions are being taken in light of the latest scientific understanding, or whether they're being taken in the light of political expediency.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the politicians are saying, oh no, we're doing this because the scientists, this is the latest, this is the news just in. But more and more of the population are thinking, no, this is political expediency. And this isn't just to do with COVID. History has shown that if you keep on lying to people, or if you keep on giving people duff information, eventually the people just don't believe anything they're being told. No. And once people don't believe anything they're being told, they're made they're denied action. They're unable to weigh up situations and make decisions for themselves because they don't trust anything that they're being told. And whatever happens with COVID, in the future, in the years ahead, it's going to be very, very difficult for politicians to regain any kind of credibility at all. Because this moving picture, this shimmering mirage of the supposed solution to COVID has just left everybody dropping their shoulders and saying, oh, they're just making this up as they go along now. Well, they might not be, but that's the impression that's the impression that more and more people are having. And in the future, the next time there's anything to be handled and the politicians start telling us that, this is how we should handle it, based on the COVID experience, too many people are going to say, yeah, he's just saying that.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help when the chief medical officer actually admits that he came out with some numbers which were meant to scare the public because it was a projection, except it wasn't in some ways a prediction. And you go, what the hell are you talking about? You've just literally plucked a number out of the air, as was the rule of 6 plucked out of the air, as was the 10 p.m. curfew plucked out of the air. So you're not wrong to say that they are doing it as they go. I just don't think they've got a plan at all.
You always, your watchwords all the time are common sense.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely right. And that the population have been denied the application of their own common sense. And that politicians and the scientists, whoever they are, have taken it upon themselves to say, no, people's common sense is neither here nor there. We are going to lay down the law. That law is going to change on an hourly basis for days and weeks on end. But that is going to be how we handle this. So you take away agency from people. And this common sense is absolutely vital at all times. And if the authorities had just acknowledged and worked with the common sense of the population, it was established very early on that the elderly were very, very vulnerable to this, and that people who were overweight or diabetes or an underlying health condition or a heart condition, very, very vulnerable. And from the beginning, common sense would have empowered people to say, right, we'll look after them. We'll make sure those people are out of the way. They're out of harm's way. And the rest of us will get on with life so that we can keep earning the money and paying the taxes that keep the wheels on the bus.
Yeah, absolutely.
But instead, the scientists sent everybody home to their bedrooms for a year.
Yeah.
and now we've got the situation that we've got. And ultimately, it's because they wouldn't allow people to use and apply common sense. And common sense has been keeping the species alive for 200,000 years. We're still here.
I know. Unbelievable stuff. Neil, listen, we've come to the end once again, but brilliant as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Oliver, of course, archaeologist, TV presenter of Coast, a man that speaks an awful lot of common sense. Luckily, we are here in the home of common sense, and more of it will prevail than there will be prevailing, I can guarantee you, in the House of Commons later on when we do Prime Minister's Questions coming up in about half an hour. This is Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.